Hello everyone, and welcome to this video which is in our Great Engine game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and we are taking a look at a lovely little game played between AlphaZero and the Baron in the World Chess Software Championship. So this is just a little interlude in the middle of my Stockfish opening repertoire course. More of that to come later this week, but this game was so lovely I just had to share it with you. It's played in the World Chess Software Championship, slightly unusual championship from an engine perspective. The engines are allowed to have a book, an opening book, as large as they like in actual fact. So yeah, you wonder sometimes, which software is being tested really, the one that's playing the game or the one that produced the opening book. Certainly makes it harder for the stronger engines to get wins against the weaker engines. But in this game, Leela does it beautifully. So how did the game go? So d4, e6, e4, d5, knight c3, knight f6 and e5, and we're in the Steinitz variation of the French, which is pretty much the main line of the French, I think, at the moment, and definitely the #1 choice of all of the engines. So after knight d7, f4, c5, knight f3, a6, a little move order trick there, bishop e3, and now knight c6, and we've really reached one of the main positions of the Steinitz. Now queen to d2 is pretty much automatic from white, always has been, but Leela plays another move that's well, always useful in the French Steinitz, and plays the move a3. What is a3 useful for? Well, black might go b5 to b4, so this pawn helps restrict it. Also, if black plays a move like queen b6 and then tries to take the pawn on b2, then knight a4 is a great reply, trapping the queen, and the pawn on a3 has played its role by taking away b4 from the black queen. So yeah, I mean, lots of ideas. I mean, also d takes c5. After d takes c5, then b4 is an actual threat, so it maybe forces black to react immediately to that capture. Yeah, I mean, when I put it on my engines and made Komodo and Stockfish play against each other, both Komodo and Stockfish wanted to just go for this well-known endgame, actually. So queen d2 takes, and queen b6 takes, and in principle, this is slightly better for white. Space advantage, nice square on d4, possibilities to play on both sides of the board. In practice, certainly with strong engines, yeah, white doesn't really seem to get anywhere there. It's one of those positions that if you play it as a human against a strong endgame player, then you have a very unpleasant experience as black, but the engines make it look easy. What they really do nicely here is get this knight active. Knight round to c5, and then afterwards put some pressure on the white centre in order to stop white from just expanding without any cares. And well, I mean, the sort of ending that you end up with is one that yeah, obviously to humans could seem a little bit awkward. You're after all, you've still got a good knight against a not so great bishop, an isolated pawn on d5. But the engines find these, very, very easy to hold, and indeed, it's not easy here for white to get at black's weaknesses. And well, of course, black's got an isolated pawn on d5 here, but white has two on d3, so it's not so, the structural situation is not so clear anymore. But that is really what they want to do. The Baron plays b5, which, to be honest, would be my reaction too. Just not taking the queens off, but keeping some tension in the game. Bishop d3 is played by Leela, and yeah, I mean, here you can see Leela making use of this a3 move and not putting the queen on d2. So it's actually quite a subtle little opening thing. The point is that there's no b4. If you didn't have the pawn here, then white could play b4, c4, and really, yeah, cause a lot of problems for the white minor pieces. a3 restricts this, and of course, by keeping the queen on d1, you keep the opportunity of maybe playing it to g4 or to h5 later. So pretty nice idea here from Leela. I'd never seen this one before, never seen this move order before, never really understood actually why you'd play this move a3, what the specific difference could be. But this move bishop d3 is very nice. Now again, Stockfish and Komodo, as befits, you know, the best engines, they spot danger from quite a way off, and they don't want to just let it happen. So Rook B8 is what they want to do, and after castles, then B4, takes, and takes, and knight E2, bishop C5. It's a bit of a wrecking operation in a way, you know, trying to swap off some minor pieces, stop white from really getting solid. But well, Stockfish was pretty happy with this position as white. Only managed to draw against Komodo, but had a nice initiative all the way through. And well, Dragon did it slightly differently. After Rook B8, played an interesting idea actually. Just played D takes C5. Bishop takes, and then showed another point of A2 to A3, being able to play B4 like this, and well, some good control over the central dark squares there. And again, you know, I mean, well, I mean, Stockfish survived as black, but yeah, the evaluation was about 0.7, 0.8 around here, and yeah, I mean, I'd much rather be white here. Obviously, Stockfish holds it for you know, 100 moves, but yeah, would be a bit tough for a human player, I think. So Bishop E7 was played by the Baron, castles, and now, I mean, really, Stockfish and Komodo are really bringing out all the stops, you know, to really try and block up the position, because they're already seeing the danger that's coming. So F5 is what they all wanted to do. Queen D2 castles. Yeah, now we go H3 and then look for G4. But yeah, this wasn't too bad for black. I mean, this is the game Stockfish against Dragon, and Dragon playing the knight into E4. Takes, and bishop D7. I mean, white swaps off the dark squared bishops, and in principle has got one of these positions with, you know, a very nice minor piece against the yeah, the black light squared bishop. But yeah, I would have thought that white would have quite a few good chances here, you know, with possibilities of G4 and F5, but Stockfish made very little progress against Komodo Dragon. So yeah, again, this doesn't look like a bad defense. But the Baron was a little bit oblivious to what was going to happen, which is not too shameful, because it is very unusual. So D takes C5 played from Leela, which I think was a novelty. And here again, you know, obviously Komodo Dragon and Stockfish seeing the coming danger, and they were just giving up a pawn basically in order to distract the white pieces from the king's side and have some chance of surviving. So King H1, they were playing D4, knight takes C5, bishop E2, queen C7. I mean, it's not a full 100% pawn, but it's quite a way there. Stockfish won this. Komodo Dragon got stuck a little bit somehow and only made a draw in the end. But I mean, it's clearly, you know, a pretty good position for white here. Stockfish started with queen E1, which looks, you know, very, very sensible here. And after takes, well, it really is looking like a clear pawn. However, the Baron, after D takes C5, played the very natural knight takes C5. What could be more natural than threatening knight takes D3, also having the idea of D4 in the position? Well, we get a typical reply, though in a rather unusual setting. It's bishop takes H7 check, king H7 and knight G5 check. So what's unusual about this? Well, I mean, the standard things are there that white needs. So a pawn on E5 that stops a knight getting to F6 if it ever could. A knight coming into G5, a queen, you know, that Leela cunningly kept on D1, ready to come out to G4 or to H5. The slightly unusual thing, though, is that black's got a bishop on E7 that can take this knight on G5, and normally that would be enough just to completely stop the attack. The problem is that after bishop takes G5, we go F takes G5, and then white is actually gaining a tempo here, because this knight on C5 is hanging. So black's got to do something about that, because black needs to be material up to you know, to have any chance of surviving the white attack. But then this gives white a tempo, and of course, you know, the fact that white already had F4 in, which is also slightly unusual for this sort of bishop H7 check tactic, it means that the rook is ready to come over to the H file either via F3 or via F4. So it's actually a really dangerous situation for black. Now black played probably the best defense, which was to go back to D7. I mean, D4 is the critical one, just taking more pieces basically. But then I go check here and then rook f4. I mean, I could go to f3 as well, but with the rook on f4, this gives me the possibility of taking this pawn either later or en route. So, and you see the advantage here, rook h4, f5, and then bishop takes d4. G takes f6 instead of bishop takes d4 is winning, but this is rather thematic, I think. You know, makes use of this rook on h4. And then, well, I mean, the big problem is that, yeah, you know, you can't move this knight away because I'm going to have checks and queen takes g7. So the best line is to go knight e4, which is a little bit tricky because bishop e5, queen b6 check is a little bit oopsie. You can imagine the typical mate following there, chock and chock. Lovely. But after knight e4, we've actually got this strong idea, which I found without an engine. Takes and takes. And we're threatening queen g7, and the key point is that queen g5 can be met by bishop g7. When queen g7, rook f1 check wins the queen. So yeah, there's nothing much, nothing fantastic there. If you go knight to e4, for example, then I just go check, king g8, takes, and then just do the old rook lift. I can't go to f3, but f4 is good enough. And actually after f5, we just play very simple g takes f6, with the idea that check, I just come here and rook f4 and win the queen with a completely winning position. So knight d7 was played. I mean, the knights are at least, you know, getting within striking distance of some defensive squares. But now check, king g8 and rook f3. And here black's got two possibilities. Black can take on e5 with the c6 knight or with the d7 knight. I mean, I felt that this was more natural in a way, simply because you know, the knight on c6 is stopping bishop d4, and it also feels like you're clearing some space so that this king can flee over to the queen side. In actual fact, the variations are not easy. I mean, I spent a reasonable amount of time without an engine, you know, getting some ideas together, and I didn't find the best line. I found a decent line, you know, but yeah, it's more complex than you'd think. More complex than always appears when you're just watching the engine play. So rook h3, threatening to deliver mate on h7 or h8. So f5 is the only move. Now, funnily enough, here g takes f6 is not very dangerous. We just go here, and after here, I just check out of the way and go rook f5, and well, you know, white's got it all to do really, and not really that many attacking pieces in the mix. So what I decided to do was to play the move after f5 to play g6 instead and pick up the piece. And after knight g6, queen g6, well, we can see that white's got a promising position here, a pawn down, but many weak dark squares in the black position. Obviously the h-file, we're going to be able to displace the black king. Just the only question is, you know, how do you get at the black position? Because those pawns on d5, e6, f5, together with a knight on c6 and a queen on f6 now, they're going to be a reasonably tough barrier. So, I mean, I actually spent a lot of time on this position without an engine, just trying to understand it properly. Unfortunately, didn't find the best move, missed key tactic. I mean, the one that I started on was bishop c5, and that was just because I had a sort of a flash when I saw this position that after d4, I've got the move knight e4. And what's the idea? Well, I'm threatening knight d6 or knight g5. You know, this bishop c5 is really great because it stops the king from coming to e7. So, you know, it's helping to restrict this king. And after queen e4, I go check, I go rook h7, attacking g7, the queen's been distracted. And after rook f7, I go queen h5. And I'm just threatening rook h8, and this bishop c5 is doing a wonderful job of stopping the king escaping from f8, and the queen's doing a wonderful job of covering the f7 square. So that looked really cool. Yeah, unfortunately there was a move I couldn't break, but Stockfish just laughed at me because he said that was +5. But there was something very similar that that turned out to be Black's best move, and this is the move bishop d7. And yeah, the reason it's a very strong move is that the obvious bishop f8 doesn't work at all, because we've got queen e3 check there and queen h6 with yeah, a very good position for black. So bishop c5 is not actually as powerful a threat as you'd think, and it just gives black the opportunity to play bishop d7 and maybe aim for rook h8 later. The move I eventually settled on was just the calm bishop f2, and I just wanted to play rook e1, nudge the queen from e5, and then well, start hitting black ferociously. Yeah, I mean, it turned out to be yeah, quite good for white, but not 100% clear. Knight e7, rook e1, black goes queen f4, keeps things annoying. And then this move g3 was what the engine wanted, just covering the f4 square and preparing to chase away the queen from e5 and really, you know, push it away. But it's not so you know, 100% clear. What my engines went for, that was something much better. They went for, well, there are a couple of ideas, but all mixed together with the bishop coming to g5, and yeah, this is a pretty good line, just with actually threatening to go queen check and rook f6 check. That's pretty strong. And after knight e7 we do the same. I mean, one of the reasons I rejected it was I wasn't 100% sure that these lines were completely, I mean, they're obviously very good, but, you know, are they winning, or should I be looking for something clearer? You know, the eternal dilemma of a chess player playing a practical game. But in actual fact, you know, of course, Stockfish has no such fears, and it was already at +5 and relaxing in its paddling pool. So yeah, this does seem to be a pretty clear win, although, yeah, you know, some accuracy required. So that was knight d takes e5. So Baron played knight c takes e5. Keeps the knight ready to come to f6 to defend, which is good, but leaves the black position rather gummed up, and rook h3, f5, and now bishop d4 was played. Yeah, g6 this time doesn't really work. We just take, and we go knight f6, and we're threatening queen e8. I mean, white still has compensation, but yeah, this knight on f6 is, yeah, much more useful than a knight on c6. So bishop d4 was played by Leela, and we're just threatening well, g6 for example, and after knight g6 we go queen h7, and then we've got queen takes g7, you know, the bishop and the queen combining against the g7 pawn. So queen e8 played. Black's got to try and chase away the white queen, and black really wants to run away to the queen side, but it's obviously going to be a little bit tricky. Rook e1 played from Leela, queen e7 check, g6, and king e8. And now a very interesting moment. I mean, Stockfish and Komodo mostly, they just look at this and they say, okay, well, we'll just grab the material like this and just have an easy win. For example, rook e3, queen h5, bishop d7, or what's a bit more thematic, king c7. I go knight e2, c3, knight f4, you know, just really just entrench yourself in the squares and then just win by pressure in the end. You know, nothing wrong with that at all. But Leela goes for the artistic, the complete bind basically, and sacrifices the exchange with knight takes e5. So I mean, what is white's idea here? Well, you see it in Leela's next move. Basically, you know, the knight's going to come round to e2 to d4. We're going to play c3 to consolidate, and then eventually we're just going to end up advancing this rook's pawn and then queening the g pawn afterwards. That's the idea. You know, as always, the thing is there's some disruption, and yeah, I mean, this way of playing, yeah, the concept completely human understandable, and I think a lot of human players would play this way. Defending it against, making sure it really wins against engine defense is a little tougher, because there's some important tactics and some important ways to play to see there. So d4 is played just to open up the a8 h1 diagonal, and also to yeah, to give black some possibilities for perpetual. And now white plays the very fine move c3. I mean, actually just looking to play c takes d4, consolidating the bishop on e5. If you go dc3, well, I go rook c3, and the lines you've opened are for white, not for not for black. So d3 was played by the Baron. Rook takes d3, queen c5 check, bishop d4, queen c4, and knight f4. And this is the key structure to spot. This knight on f4 defends the rook on d3. Bishop d4 is a rock, of course, attacking both sides and also blocking the d file as well. And when black goes rook d7, we go queen h3, and queen h4 actually was preferred by both Stockfish and Komodo, but it doesn't really make much difference. I mean, white's idea simply is white's going to move the queen over to e3, and then do lots of stuff to consolidate its position, improve it, and then at some stage it's going to exchange off black's active pieces, rook on d7, queen on c4, and leave black with a terribly passive rook on g8 it will be, to defend the pawn on g7. This very AlphaZero theme that we have grown to know and love, swapping off the opponent's active pieces, leaving the opponent with passive pieces. That's exactly what Leela's going to do. So bishop b7, queen e3, bishop e4, rook d2, and just for a moment it looks as if black has got more active. But yeah, this terrible weakness on g7 is really crippling black, and well, Leela displays a little bit of a sadistic streak, improving its position to the maximum, and now playing bishop e5. So swapping off the rooks, and then looking, I mean, to start with, we're looking to invade in this way, which is going to be very dangerous for black's king. So the Baron felt compelled to exchange off queens, and we end up with this glorious position, really typical NN against non-NN engine position, where, you know, white has just got the a pawn for the exchange. You know, black doesn't seem to be too bad, but this rook cannot abandon the pawn on g7, otherwise white's got two passed pawns. And you'll notice how prepared Leela is for that scenario, because the pawn's already on h5. But yeah, how on earth does black get free? This light square bishop is useless, not able to attack anything important. The only way that black can defend the pawn on g7 is to play king f8. And then, well, after king f8, well, what can your rook on g8 do? Absolutely nothing. Black is just completely paralyzed, and Leela just moves its king up, and then is going to start moving its pawn up. And after bishop c2, Leela decides, well, let's just finish this. We're just going to take on g7, for example, king e7, we'll take on g7, and then just roll the h-pawn to glory. A really, really nice game from Leela. I mean, you know, again, you know, the top engine matches, you don't see these sort of strategical crushes that much, but you know, put an engine like Leela against a somewhat weaker engine like the Baron, and you just see something quite beautiful like this. The bishop h7 check sacrifice was very, very nice, a familiar theme, but in a rather unusual setting. And you know, the attack was quite long term, quite a lot of stuff to calculate, really, and not at all clear that the white's mating. In fact, white isn't mating, but what sort of happens is that along the way the positional advantages just seem to accrue, and yeah, you know, in the end black survives, the king is okay, but the positional disadvantages that that black has picked up along the way, they prove fatal. And yeah, again, I always like this this theme where you know, the neural net redeploys and then just ends up swapping off pieces and leaving the opponent with absolutely nothing. Just a decent looking position at first glance, but one that's totally lost and totally paralyzed. Really nice play from Leela. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and also keep your eyes peeled for the next lot of videos on Stockfish's opening repertoire that are going to be coming out a little bit later this week. Thanks for watching.